Big Boss Man has revealed the 5 players he absolutely hates, and honestly, it's not hard to see why. The stories behind these rivalries aren't just wild, they're downright unbelievable. So buckle up, because what you're about to hear might just blow your mind. Let's jump right into it. 1. Hulk Hogan. When people talk about Big Boss Man's early days in the WWF, it's impossible not to bring up his heated rivalry with Hulk Hogan. It wasn't just another wrestling feud. For Boss Man, it was personal. Hogan was the face of the company, the golden boy everyone cheered for, while Boss Man was cast as the enforcer, the bad guy in the uniform. And over time, that line between the story and real life started to blur. It all started when Boss Man teamed up with Akeem to form the Twin Towers. Together, they became the perfect villains to challenge Hogan and Randy Savage, the unstoppable mega powers. Their matches were loud, chaotic, and full of tension, both in the ring and behind the scenes. Hogan, being the top guy, always had the spotlight, while Boss Man was still trying to prove he belonged in the main event picture. That kind of dynamic breeds resentment fast, especially when you're sharing the ring with someone who controls most of the creative decisions. Their feud reached its peak in one of the most talked about steel cage matches in WWF history. It was brutal, intense, and dangerous. Everything wrestling fans loved in that era. Hogan and Boss Man battled for what felt like an eternity, trading heavy blows until the unthinkable happened. Hogan slammed Boss Man off the top of the steel cage. It was a jaw-dropping moment that showed just how far Boss Man was willing to go to prove himself. But for him, that risk didn't come with respect. It came with bruises, pain, and a growing sense of being undervalued. Behind the curtain, Boss Man wasn't shy about his frustration. He felt Hogan's ego and backstage control often overshadowed other hardworking talents. Every time Hogan's name was on the card, everyone else had to play second fiddle. Boss Man, a proud and intense performer, hated that. He didn't want to just lose to Hogan. He wanted to earn his place beside him. That bitterness never fully disappeared. Even after the feud ended, there was always a quiet tension between them. 2. Dusty Rhodes. It all began in Jim Crockett Promotions, long before the blue uniform and nightstick. Bubba Rogers was Dusty's bodyguard on screen, a silent enforcer who stood by his side while the American dream took center stage. But as time passed, Bubba grew tired of standing in the background. He wanted his own spotlight. That tension soon spilled over into the ring, leading to their violent bunkhouse stampede matches, wild, no-rules brawls that fit perfectly with both men's hard-hitting styles. But behind all the chaos, there was real frustration brewing. Dusty was the booker at the time, meaning he had major creative control over who got pushed and who didn't. Boss Man felt like he had to work twice as hard to earn half the recognition. He respected Dusty's mind for the business, but couldn't ignore how much power he held. And when you're trying to make a name for yourself, being stuck under someone else's shadow, especially someone as beloved as Dusty, can sting. Their rivalry reignited years later in 1989, when both found themselves under the WWF banner. This time, it was Big Boss Man versus the Common Man, and once again, their chemistry was undeniable. Their matches were physical and emotional, each man playing his role to perfection. Dusty, the working-class hero, and Boss Man, the ruthless enforcer. But deep down, there was still tension. Dusty's easy charm and crowd connection were everything Boss Man didn't have. Fans adored Rhodes no matter what, while Boss Man often got painted as the villain no matter how hard he worked. 3. Out of all the rivalries Big Boss Man ever had, none were darker or more unsettling than his feud with Nailz. This wasn't just a storyline about two wrestlers. It was a war between a man of the law and a man who claimed to be one of his victims. And in true early 90s WWF fashion, the lines between story and reality blurred in ways that made fans, and even wrestlers backstage, genuinely uncomfortable. The angle began in 1992, when Nailz appeared on WWF television as an ex-convict with a grudge. Dressed in an orange prison jumpsuit, speaking in a distorted, haunting voice, Nailz claimed that during his time behind bars, Boss Man, portrayed as a former prison guard, had beaten and abused him. The premise alone was chilling, and the tension that followed made it one of the most violent feuds of the era. Their rivalry exploded when Nailz attacked Bossman during an episode of Superstars of Wrestling. The beating was brutal. Nailz choked him with a nightstick, slammed him into the mat, and left him lying motionless. The scene was so realistic that some fans wondered if the attack had gone too far. For Bossman, who prided himself on toughness and realism in his performances, that moment crossed a line. It wasn't just acting, it was personal. The tension didn't stop there. The two faced off at Survivor Series 1992 in the infamous nightstick on a pole match, where the first man to grab the weapon could legally use it. It was rough, dirty, and full of pent-up anger. Bossman eventually came out on top, but the hatred between them never really cooled. Not long after, things got even uglier backstage. Reports circulated that Nailz had a physical altercation with Vince McMahon, accusing the company of unfair pay, and Bossman's name was rumored to have come up in the argument. The two never worked together again, and the bitterness lingered. 4. Al Snow. It started as a typical rivalry over the Hardcore Championship, but it quickly spiraled into something much darker and more outrageous. The kind of over-the-top storytelling that defined that wild time in wrestling. Al Snow was known for his eccentric personality and his friendship with a mannequin head named Head. But things took an emotional turn when he started bringing a tiny chihuahua named Pepper to the ring. It was meant to show a softer, almost comical side to his unstable character. However, that lighthearted detail became the centerpiece of one of WWE's strangest storylines ever. Big Boss Man, always portrayed as a no-nonsense law enforcer, decided to use Pepper to get under Snow's skin. The feud intensified when Boss Man kidnapped Pepper, leaving fans, and Al Snow, completely shocked. The story took a disturbing twist when Boss Man invited Snow to dinner, pretending to make peace. During the meal, Snow ate happily, until Boss Man revealed that the food he had just eaten was supposedly his beloved dog Pepper. And even though fans knew it wasn't real, it left them both stunned and amused by the absurdity. The rivalry didn't stop there. It reached its peak at the Unforgiven pay-per-view in September 1999 in the now infamous Kennel from Hell match. It was a unique setup, a steel cage surrounded by a Hell in a Cell structure, with guard dogs positioned outside the ring. The idea was that the dogs would make escaping more dangerous, adding an extra layer of chaos. However, in reality, the match turned into a bizarre mess. The dogs didn't exactly cooperate. They barked, wandered, and even relieved themselves ringside. Despite the match being widely criticized, the feud perfectly reflected the unpredictable energy of the era. It showed how far WWE was willing to go for entertainment, even if it meant blurring the line between shock and silliness. 5. It all started when Big Show, the giant powerhouse, was dealing with an emotional storyline about his father's illness and eventual passing. Instead of showing sympathy, Big Boss Man used it as an opportunity to mock, taunt, and emotionally torture him. Boss Man's character during this feud was at his cruelest. He seemed to take pleasure in Big Show's grief, and the WWE audience couldn't believe how far he went to get under Show's skin. The tension exploded during one of the most infamous segments in WWE history. During Big Show's on-screen father's funeral, Boss Man arrived in full uniform, complete with his police hat and nightstick, interrupting the ceremony in the most disrespectful way imaginable. He grabbed the microphone and began insulting the deceased, calling him names and ridiculing Big Show's family right in front of the mourners. Just when it seemed like things couldn't get any worse, Boss Man hooked the casket to the back of his car with a chain and drove off, dragging the coffin across the cemetery while Big Show jumped on top of it, desperately trying to stop him. It was wild, shocking, and darkly comedic, the kind of moment fans still talk about decades later. The feud continued from there, with Boss Man using every opportunity to humiliate Big Show, even going as far as claiming that Show was a bastard child, whose father wasn't really his dad. This constant torment drove Big Show to rage, setting up a series of heated brawls that perfectly fit the chaotic tone of the Attitude Era. Their match at Armageddon 1999 saw Big Show finally get his revenge, using his size and fury to destroy Boss Man in dominant fashion. And that wraps up today's video. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe so you never miss an update, and we'll catch you in the next one.